My Lords, as a bishop whose diocese includes around 300 places of worship, most of which will find this bill directly applies to them, I have, along with my Right Reverend friends on these benches, a very obvious interest to declare. But as Bishop of Manchester, I have a more specific reason for wanting to see this bill reach the statute books. Martyn Hett, whose name is immortalised in the informal title by which we know this bill, was killed some 3 minutes' walk from my cathedral. We're all grateful for his mother Figan's persistence over these last 7 years and for achieving the degree of cross-party consensus that's brought us to this point today. In the immediate aftermath of the Manchester attack, it fell to me to help lead my city and its people in how we responded. I spoke then of the crucial difference between defiance and revenge. For me, that comes direct from my reading of the Christian scriptures, but the application is for those of all faith and none. The terrorist sought to divide us. Acts of revenge by one part of the community against another would have played into his hands. Instead, we showed our defiance. We came together in one of the most moving examples of a community embracing its diversity and showing its love that I've ever seen. We in Manchester were helped in responding to the atrocity by the support given to us by national leaders, not least of then Prime Minister, now the noble Baroness May of Maidenhead, who it's a pleasure to see in her place among us this afternoon. Crucially, by being defiant, we did not allow the extremists to determine how we lived our lives. We didn't cower behind our front doors. We didn't retreat to the safety of those who looked, thought or believed like us. We got on with our lives whilst being somewhat more vigilant than before. And that same principle needs to lie at the heart of this bill. Its provisions need to be such that they do not lead to mass cancellations of events, nor to the closure of social, commercial and religious venues which cannot afford the cost of compliance. My Lords, what we enact in this bill must be proportionate. It must balance the very real risks we face with the need for us to live as we choose, not as the terrorists seek to dictate. I do think, my Lords, we got that balance broadly right in the form this bill has reached us. I'm grateful for the various amendments made in the other place. It's right that we focus on the expected attendance as an event rather than some technical capacity of a building. Many of my churches are built to hold the largest occasion likely to be ever required. And whilst I do pray for the day when every service is as packed as Christmas Eve, I need to be realistic. And we need to pursue measures commensurate with the numbers that we expect. And the same will apply to many other sorts of venues. I'm grateful, as other noble lords have already expressed, for the standard tier commencing at 200 rather than 100. This will save smaller events, often community-led and dependent on volunteers. It will help vital local venues remain open to serve their community. I do think, however, increasing the figure to 300 will go too far, and I'm minded at the moment to oppose any changes to the number during the future stages of the bill. Whilst clearly we're still at an early stage of our consideration of the bill in this House, I hope that either today or at a later stage, the noble Lord the Minister will be able to offer faith and voluntary sector groups, along with other less commercial venues, training that's free, easy to access and available in a wide range of languages and formats. All of us need to be fully equipped for the responsibilities that this bill assigns to us. Given that places of worship across all main religions form something between 10 and 20% of the affected premises, in my guess, I'd ask the noble Lord for his assurances that His Majesty's government will look at producing guidance specifically to address these contexts before the bill is enacted. And I do assure him that I and others stand ready to help in that task in any way that we can. I thank those who drafted the bill for recognising that places of worship are special and are allocated accordingly to the standard tier, irrespective of capacity or likely attendance. This does, as again other lords have already noted, appropriately recognise the relationship between those buildings and the communities that they serve, and the deep experience faith communities have of working with both police and specialist security providers for those occasional very large events that we host. Much will no doubt be said later today and as we go on about the role of the SIA as regulator. As with the other provisions of the bill, the regulator's powers and responsibilities need to be proportionate to the task. We don't want a toothless tiger, nor an overbearing and unaccountable overlord. But I'll listen carefully to the arguments made on the powers, responsibilities and accountabilities of the regulator as the bill progresses. Finally, my lords, whilst reiterating the thanks of myself and my colleagues on these benches to Figan Murray, I would also want to single out Brendan Cox. Brendan, whose wife Jo was murdered whilst fulfilling her parliamentary duties. I've had the privilege of meeting him on a number of occasions and being able to offer my own support to what he, Feig and others have been doing over these last few years to address the ever-present threat of terrorist atrocities. But Jo's death reminds us that one of the main ongoing terror threats in the UK, as recognised by our security forces, comes from those inspired by extreme right-wing voices. These seem to be increasingly tolerated, perhaps even encouraged, on some social media platforms. Beyond the scope of this bill, but building on the exchanges we had at oral questions earlier today, I do urge His Majesty's Government to complete the implementation of the Online Safety Act now as a matter of urgency, so that fines based on total global earnings can be levied against those who seek to undermine our parliamentary democracy from outside the UK. It's not enough, my lords, for us to focus purely on security at public events. We need to get upstream. 2025 must be the year when Britain takes decisive action against those who seek to radicalise others or to normalise violence in pursuit of political ends, whether they come from within the UK or beyond our shores, and no matter how wealthy or how powerfully connected they may be.
Yeah.